Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another video. In this video, I will be analyzing Game 6 of the World Championship match held in Astana between Ding Liren and Ian Nepomniachtchi. So, in today's game, Ding Liren won and has managed to equalize the score. So far, the score is 3-3 with 2 wins for each player. So, basically, we can see here that in every single game that Ding Liren had the white pieces, there was a decisive result. He lost the first one, and then he won the next two. Today, he opened up with one d4, like I had kind of predicted yesterday. If you haven't watched yesterday's video, then please feel free to check it out. And Ian Nepomniachtchi played knight f6. I'm assuming that his main preparation for this match is the Nimzo Indian, and the Queen's Gambit declined after third knight f3. So Ding Liren, though, avoided the main lines and went for knight f3, d5, and now bishop f4. And this is the defining move of the Landon system, and the knight is already on f3. c5 by Nepomniachtchi, which is one of the most common ways to combat the Landon system. e3 from white, knight c6, knight bd2, and now taking on d4, exchanging the pawns, and bishop f5, developing the light squared bishop for white, c3 just to stabilize and to give even further support to the pawn on d4, and e6 from black, which opens up the dark squared bishop. And here, how did white continue? With bishop b5, pinning the knight on c6, bishop d6 followed, and an exchange of the dark squared bishops. Strategically speaking, this is in white's favor, and the reason for this is very simple, that the pawns in the center for white, they are on dark squares on d4 and c3, while for black they are on e6 and d5, they are on light squares. So white has a good bishop and black has a bad bishop. However, black's supposedly bad bishop is developed outside the pawn chain to an active diagonal. So still, it's only a tiny bit better for white. Castles and castles. Rook e1, a very important move which controls the e5 square, h6, and now knight e5, like I said. The knight goes there. Of course, black cannot take. This is a tactic for beginners, because now we have a double attack against the queen and the knight on f6. So he didn't take, and he went knight e7. Okay, a4, supporting the bishop and gaining some space on the queen side. a6 from black, bishop back to f1, okay. And knight to d7, an exchange of knights, and now a5. So by playing a5, what has white achieved? They have fixed the pawn on b7 now, and they have grabbed more space on the queen side. Queen to c7, queen f3, rook f to c8, and now rook a3. So a rook lift, bishop f5, knight b3, knight c6. Okay, so black is putting pressure on the pawn on a5, queen g3, offering a trade of queens, queen e7 from black, and now h4. Okay, rook goes to e8, and now knight to c5. Knight on c5 is really well placed. It's putting pressure on the pawn on b7. e5 from black, and now rook b3, hitting the pawn on b7 along with the knight. Knight takes a5, and now rook takes e5. And the point here, of course, is that if they take the rook, then takes on e7, takes on e7, and now knight takes b3, and white is completely winning because they have an extra piece. So what happened instead? The queen goes to f6, and now rook a3, hitting the knight. Knight goes to c4, bishop takes c4, pawn takes back on c4, and now h5. Okay, knight takes b7 was preferred by the engine here, which is also possible. Knight takes b7. Okay, h5 hits the bishop. Bishop goes to c2. I think the engine preferred bishop d3. Yeah, bishop c2. Knight takes b7, queen to b6, so a double attack against the knight on b7 and the pawn on b2. And the game continued with knight d6. Of course, just a beginner's tactic. Of course, they haven't blundered the piece. Ding didn't blunder a piece because if queen takes d6, then rook takes c8, of course, and after rook takes c8, queen takes d6. And of course, you can see the importance of moving the h-pawn. It's not going to be a back rank mate on e1, but the king can go to h2. So knight d6 was played, and now rook takes e5, queen takes e5, queen takes b2, hitting the rook, and now rook a5, king to h7, okay. Rook goes to c5, hitting even more the c4 pawn, but it's not only that. The rook now has very aggressive intentions. The rook wants to go to c7 and from there to hit f7. And we can see the usefulness of having the pawn up to h5, and it stops the black bishop from coming to g6 to support the king and to defend the f7 pawn. Queen c1 check, king h2, f6, queen g3, a5, and now knight takes c4, a4, and now knight e3, very important move, hitting the bishop, and also preparing to bring the knight into the d5 square later on to join the attack. Bishop goes to b1, and now rook c7, hitting the pawn on g7, threatening a mate. Rook g8, defending the mate, and now knight into d5, okay. And the third, of course, is knight takes f6, because the pawn on g7 is pinned. So king goes to h8 to unpin the pawn, and rook a7 just to keep an eye on the a4 pawn, because at the end of the day, it's a passed pawn, and white needs to be careful about it. You know that the passed pawns are criminals that must be held under lock and key, according to Nimzovich in his book My System. Mild measures for when it comes to dealing with passed pawns, like police surveillance, are not sufficient. a3 was played, okay, and now knight e7, hitting the rook. What does white want to do? Just take the rook and then checkmate on g7. So rook f8 followed, and now d5, okay. a2 continued, and now queen c7, and now, of course, the threat is simple. The threat is knight goes to g6, and after bishop takes g6, knight g6 checks, bishop takes g6, queen takes g7 checkmate, king to h7, and now knight g6, threatening mate on g7. Rook g8, defending it, but now queen f7 finishes off the game. A very spectacular finish by white, by Ding Liren, because let's say black moves the bishop. First of all, if bishop takes g6, the problem is that h takes g6 is a forced mate, because now it's just a checkmate. And also, another problem is that, let's say they play bishop f5 in order to threaten a1 queen. Well, white finishes off the game very nicely by going there, sacrificing the queen. If king here, of course, then rook h8 is going to be checkmate. Again, we see the importance of the h5 pawn defending the knight. And of course, if king f7, now it's rook f8, and after rook f8, it's also checkmate, because the king cannot escape to e6 and also cannot capture the knight. So not only the h5 pawn, but also the d5 pawn is extremely, extremely important, because it holds the e6 square from the black king. So putting the pawn on d5 was extremely important for Ding Liren in order to win this game and level the match now. So now it's all to play for. Tomorrow is going to be a rest day, and the action resumes on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And this time, Ian Nepomniachtchi will have the white pieces. Will it be another Rui Lopez? Well, so far, the Rui Lopez has worked extremely well for Ian Nepomniachtchi. He has had, he has had 1.5 out of 2. So, but both games he got an advantage. So let's see, will Ding Liren continue to his martial strategy, or maybe has he prepared something else against 24? I don't know, perhaps the Petrov, perhaps the Berlin, perhaps some Sicilian variation. I don't know. We will see on Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching. I just wanted to say that there were a number of people criticizing Ding Liren, that how's he going to win by playing a sideline and all that. Well, maybe, I mean, as we all know, Richard Rapport is working with Ding Liren. He's one of his seconds in this World Championship match. He's there in Astana to support Ding Liren. And maybe this had an influence on this opening choice, because it's a mainstream sideline. However, it's still not a main variation, and maybe he has helped him change his mindset that he doesn't need to fight for an advantage, but instead can play, let's say, not so main variation, but try to win later on in the game, and the game will not be decided in the opening. So I don't know to what extent this happened, but he didn't get pretty much any advantage from the opening. However, he managed to outplay his opponent later on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new and you took value from it. And I will be back to comment Game 7 now on Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching. If you're a subscriber, I will watch you at the next video, and bye for now.